Hello again. Guess what? It's Nicole. I'm at the EDS show for our EDS show takeover of That Engineering Chat. And we're filming a few other episodes today, select few episodes for some special guests. And very special guest, Rab Scott is with me. He's the head of digital at AMRC. Very nice to meet you, Rab.
Hi Nicole, great to be here.
Yes, you've just been speaking today, haven't you?
I was on the keynote stage talking about the future of manufacturing.
I would love to hear more about that. If you're not all talked out, would you mind? I didn't get to listen.
What?
If you don't mind, so, well, not just for me, but for those that are listening to this and watching, could you tell us a bit more about what you talked about today, the future of manufacturing?
Absolutely, I'll put it in context I'm head of digital. I'm at the Advanced Manufacturing Research Centre, which is part of the University of Sheffield, but also part of the High Value Manufacturing Catapult. Mm-hmm. That's the plug over. And really the future of manufacturing. We've come through Industry 4. Well, we haven't come through it because we're not at the end of it, but Industry 4 has been the big buzzword for the last 10 years. It was actually 2011 that it was launched in Germany.
I remember.
As a brand. But we've actually been doing Industry 4 for ages. You know, I've got a quotation from Automation World in 2003 that basically described Industry 4. But where are we going next? You know, what is the future of manufacturing and what are the drivers behind the future of manufacturing? And it's really understanding that it can't just be around improved productivity driven by Industry 4. It can't just be around new business models because we've got an obligation to future generations to make manufacturing more sustainable while make it more effective. You know, so here we are a week before COP26. We've got 7% of the carbon bucket left before we tip over the edge, where in 1999 there was 30% left. So, you know, we're burning through it at a rapid rate, and we've got to take that into account when we make things, because money isn't everything. If you look at the World Economic Forum, there are three great pillars of sustainability. There's the environmental one, absolutely, so let's make things greener, but then there's the economic and perhaps most importantly the social one, because Industry 4 is changing the way that people work in the workplace, and we've got to be aware of that, and we've got to make the workplace a better place for people, a more inclusive place for people, and a more diverse place for people, because we know that the companies with increased diversity have got increased profitability. And actually profitability isn't just financial, it's also ecological and social.
Goodness me, I mean that's a lot to, I mean what were the sort of questions that people were asking you when you were speaking today? Were they allowed to ask you questions?
They were. I do stop talking occasionally. But really it was, well, what are the enablers to deliver this vision?
Yeah.
And the biggest enabler is data, you know. But then we've got to understand the challenges of data, about sharing data, because that is a mindset change for manufacturers. You know, the data used to be their IP. That was where their golden goose lay its egg. But now we're talking about sharing data between companies.
Yes.
And how can we do that securely? How can we do that? But then ensure that the value of that data that is released is returned to the people that invested the money to make that data.
Goodness me, that sounds like a minefield just to me. Just alone, you know, it's a lot.
And I think that it really is, because it's no longer a technological challenge. It's a cultural challenge. It's a legislative challenge. It's a regulatory challenge. So really, we need to engage with all the different components of the ecosystem and bring them together.
Yes.
To get them to understand that you can't solve it bit by bit. It's actually got to be a holistic solution that we develop. And this is where, believe it or not, in 2016, the Japanese started talking about Industry 5.
Yeah.
So Industry 5 is very much about a resilient and sustainable manufacturing process, but also one that is human-centric. So, you know, this dystopian vision of the future factory being a man and a dog, where the dog is there to make sure the man doesn't touch the machines and the man's there to feed the dog. That's not going to happen, because we still understand the value of the dexterity of the human, of the imagination of the human, of the creative and problem-solving capabilities of the human that we can't codify, we can't put into AI, we can't put into robots. So the human is very much here to stay in manufacturing. It's just that their roles will change, and their profile will change.
That's interesting. And I mean, what sort of time span do you see this? Are we talking in the next decade, or that these changes are going to really step up? Because there was a lot of robotics, wasn't there? When robotics came, when automation started to come back in, everyone was a bit like, we're going to get replaced by automation. But what you're saying there is it's the roles that are changing.
It's the roles that are changing. There was a report by Deloitte in 2015 called From Brawn to Brains, changing the profile. And it said, yes, 800,000 jobs have been lost through automation, but 3.2 million had been created through automation, and each one of those was worth £10,000 more. So actually, the messaging is one of the challenges.
Yes.
But it's also, when you look at the take-up of automation in the UK, especially around robotics, we're way down the curve.
Yeah.
And part of that is, you've got to ask, why did the Japanese go so fast and go so deep? And it was because they'd actually seen the change in the demographic profile. They were realizing that they weren't going to have those shop floor workers. They realized they had to automate. So again, it's an ecosystem view. It's a holistic view. It's not just a very narrow view. So your question of when is it going to happen? There's a Chinese proverb: the best time to plant an oak tree was 100 years ago.
That's so true.
The second best time is now.
Yes.
And we've got to drive it now, because it is part of the solution to the climate change challenge.
And how have you been talking to manufacturers about how they can do that? Is that how can we all do that? How can we start planting the oak tree today?
What we've got to do is show the impact of not doing it.
Yes, so to demonstrate in what can happen if we don't do that.
So it's what happens if we don't do it, but also the benefits of doing it.
Yes.
We've got an aging workforce, we've got different skill sets coming through. We're not creating enough traditional manufacturers, but that's because we don't have to. And yet there's still a mindset that, where am I going to get my workforce of the future? Well, you can get it anywhere. You can get it from the gaming sector, from the software sector. You've got to change your mind of what the future manufacturer or engineer looks like.
Okay, so obviously you're a professor at the university. Is that students that are coming through? Is that messaging that you're creating with that? Because it is more diverse now, isn't it? The world is, like you're saying, you can go to different sectors. That's interesting.
It really is. At the AMRC, when we started 20 years ago, and today, this year's our 20th year, we were employing production and mechanical engineers. These days, it's control systems and software engineers. So, the profile is changing, but that's in quite a rarefied atmosphere of a research centre.
Yeah.
We've got to show the value of changing the demographic of the shop floor to traditional manufacturers.
Yeah. That's a lot of food for thought.
Well, it was a talk on the future of manufacturing.
You certainly have done that. How is it to be at a show? How is it to be out at a show again? You've been well received, I'm sure.
It was a good turnout, but this is part of the messaging about the engineering design show, and it's not just a show. It's more than that. It's an opportunity to listen to great speakers. It's an opportunity to meet up with old friends that we've only seen through that little square box on the screen for the last 18 months. So no, it's been really good to get out and to get round.
Well, it's been lovely to have you on. It's been very nice to meet you. Thank you. You were well worth the wait.
No problem.
Thanks, Rab.
Thank you, Nicole.